Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. So, Harry has released the Apple TV series and it's officially out there for all of us to consume. The press has gone absolutely crazy. They've gone insane over what he said. And I just found it yet again very tone deaf to what the everyday man experiences when he has a mental health crisis or he has mental health issues. So Harry is viciously attacking his father again, and I'm sure you've read a couple of news pieces yourself. And what can I really say? It's just quite tragic that Harry almost seems to think that parents are not human beings, that they are perfect ethereal creatures that make no mistakes. And he really is pointing the finger at the firm, and he's pointing the finger at his father and trashing his father, and basically saying that due to their lack of immediate response, Meghan Markle could have lost her life, and he had to turn to chronic drinking and annihilation, self-harm, in order to cope with his awful, tragic childhood and the loss of his mother. Now, I can empathize with Harry on one hand that he did have to lose his mother in such a, what can I really say? It was very public and everything was played out on center stage. He was filmed walking behind his mother's coffin. But how long do you live in that moment for? And how long do you not recognize your privilege when you have suffered with mental health issues, but you are also an extremely privileged person? Now, Harry is pushing this agenda that he wants to help the world and he wants to help others who are suffering from a mental health crisis like he did, because he can empathize with them. But then he openly talks about the fact that he's had access to the best counselors, the access to the best therapy, access to the best alternative therapists. So he acknowledges that has access to resources that the average person who is going through a mental health crisis does not have access to. And that's the bit that he seems to be forgetting. Harry obviously is beyond help, and we can all see that. So is Meghan. She's beyond help too. And they just don't realize the wide gap between the everyday person dealing with these struggles, losing a parent at an extremely young age, and then also having financial pressures to have to deal with in order to carry on. So I read around quite a bit, so I'm just going to share my favourite excerpts from all different UK publications that have come out today. And what jumped out at me was the Independence assessment, which is a British publication, of what they saw as the flawed logic of this Apple TV mental health series. And let's not forget that Harry is playing this victimhood narrative out on center stage, but then he's monetizing his woes and his troubles, and it just comes across like convoluted tripe, right? That's all I can really say. So I'm going to get into this. I got this excerpt from The Independent, and it starts with that almost everybody in the 3 episodes supplied to critics is in some way extraordinary. From reality show winners to basketball players to a man who appears to be non-famous but is then revealed to be Robin Williams' son doesn't help. Everybody in the me you can't see speaks highly of therapy and psychoanalysis. We even see Harry in episode 3 take part in an eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy session with a trained professional. But it's only Gaga who gestures towards the money and privilege required to actually get support of that quality. So Gaga, obviously, she's a hard-working woman. She's a world-famous star. She's traveled the world. She's had a real full-life perspective, more than what Harry has in the confines of Buckingham Palace. And she's the only person that kind of highlights, well, this is a privileged story. This is something that only privileged people have access to. So they continue on to say, no television show is required to reflect absolutely everything all at once, but when it's a show that claims to reflect a universal truth about pain and struggle, yet dominated by those with unlimited access to counselling, medical professionals, and sheer time to heal, it feels half-baked, which is exactly what it is. The me you can't see is full of people talking but rarely about the things we desperately need to be talking about, which is true. The average person, as I said, can't relate to Harry's issues, right? So the Sun newspaper covered this, and what they said is Prince Harry accuses his family of showing total neglect for his mental health woes and claims Dad Charles made him suffer in a bombshell documentary set to leave the palace, of course, reeling. And in stunningly candid moments, Harry 36 launches blistering attacks on his close relatives and even admits to past booze binges to escape from his anguish. Yawn, right? He reveals he's been in therapy for 4 to 5 years, and then they quote, he said, Meghan decided to share with me the, self-harm thoughts and the practicalities of how she was going to end her life. And this really highlights Meghan Markle's narcissistic, strategic manipulation. He also said in this whole Apple TV documentary thing that he was undergoing intense therapy and counselling and all the rest of it, all the way up until the point that he met Meghan at 32. So he was someone who was definitely on her hit list, who was a fragile person. And we know that Meghan Markle is a narcissistic character that is driven by self-elevation, self-motivation, and self-gratification, right? So she sees this fragile prince, I can only imagine at the time, and she sees his weaknesses because she's very good at reading people and extracting what she wants from them until she's done with them, until she's ready to discard. And another element that I identified about this was that Harry's putting himself out there in a very vulnerable way, and he's building up this picture. He's kind of, vomiting everywhere his own personal thoughts and feelings. It's going to be very easy for Meghan to say, well, I had to leave him. He was mentally unstable. Look at all the things he was doing. It was all driven by him. I didn't even want to leave Buckingham Palace. I didn't want to leave the UK. Blah, 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 blah. So you can see that she's going to easily sidestep herself because she's not the one who's actually saying the worst stuff. It's Harry. And really attacking the royal firm. She's kind of given him the confidence and the gusto to do it, but she's not the person who's actually doing it. So I can see the way in which she's framing him for his own tragic ending, right? So it continues on here, and he said the scariest thing for her was her clarity of thought. He's also said, my father used to say to me when I was younger, he used to say, but to both William and I, well, it was like that for me, so it's going to be like that for you. That doesn't make sense. Just because you suffered, that doesn't mean your kids have to suffer. Actually, quite the opposite. If you suffered, do everything you can to make sure that whatever negative experiences you had, you can make it right for your kids. Harry spoke in the documentary about suffering through a nightmare time between his life when he was 28 all the way up until he was 32. And then he said, I'm freaking out every single time I jump in the car or see a camera. I would just start sweating, he said. And okay, so he says, I would start sweating. I was stressed. I was, just beside myself with anxiety. And yet he's talking to none other than the juggernaut of PR herself, Oprah, in front of a camera, many cameras, all right, in front of in a studio, to people that he doesn't know about his own personal business, which is something that he's never done before. This is all a new kind of way of expressing himself since he's met this case. I want to say basket case, right? And it just doesn't make any sense. Now, we've heard all of this tripe in the Africa documentary when they was moaning and groaning about their life struggles and issues in the royal family, being rich and famous and being able to, you know, access private jets and talk to people like Elton John and the Clooneys and Oprah Winfrey and Idris Elba and all these other, you know, big household names in front of starving, disabled children. I just find it physically, it makes me want to vomit. But of course I can't do that on camera. But it's just bile, right? It's rubbish. And you just don't know what exactly he's trying to prove, because no matter what Harry says at this point, no matter how much therapy he admits to having had access to, he still can't relate to that everyday person who is in social housing, or that everyday person who was raised on a big block of flats in a council estate, who has to walk past broken glass every morning and possibly know someone who has been, you know, what can I really say, physically harmed to the point where they're 6 feet under, and they went to school with that person, and they have mental health issues, and the lights don't always come on, and they're struggling to pay their bills, right? I'm just trying to come up with everyday scenarios that really are happening all over the world, in the West, in Germany, in the UK, in America, and obviously then we have the third world. We can't relate to him, and we're never going to be like, oh, poor Harry, let's get out the violins, right? We're never gonna feel that way, because the everyday person that has mental health issues just does not have the access to the resources that he's had. The only thing he's proven is that he's unreasonable, and Meghan Markle is unreasonable, and nothing that Charles done was enough. And he has to recognize that Charles, even though he's future king, even though he's in the firm, even though he had access to billions of pounds, and his relationship with Diana was not the best, and it was a tragic story, also is but a mere mortal. He's not perfect, and baby Archie's going to grow up, and their second child's going to grow up, and they're also going to ask these questions, why he felt the need to drag the whole family through the mud, because it's not going to make it right. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Charles said you have to shut up and put up and have the stiff upper lip, and Harry didn't like that. Now William is getting on with it, and he has forgotten the pain that he's causing his family, and he's signing all of these business deals. He's claiming to want a private life, and he has absolutely no regard for the wake of destruction that he's left, right? It really is a catastrophe. That's all I can really say. So I'm going to get into the last article, which is the Mirror, and it highlights Harry talking about the whole royal family was totally neglectful towards him and Meghan, and he said his life was a nightmare, and accused the royal family of total neglect. As he opened up about his mental health, he said, every single ask, request, warning, whatever it is to stop, just got met with total silence or total neglect. We spent 4 years trying to make it work, and that's another thing that I have issue with. It was not 4 years. You wasn't married to Meghan and in the institution for 4 years. So you can see he's lying again, and he done this in the Oprah interview. He lied about certain key events that really didn't happen. I don't know if it was true whether Kate really did make Meghan cry, but I feel like in so many respects, because of the way she said it, and she didn't really say exactly how Kate made her cry. She just said, oh, she made me cry, but she didn't say. Kate basically said it's royal protocol for girls to wear tights at weddings, and it's royal protocol for them to wear their hair like this and walk in this formation, and you need to stick to the royal protocol, and then walked out. Because I'm sure it was a very rational thing that she done, which of course I've covered before on the channel. It's a lie. It was not 4 years. You dated Meghan for a year, you spent 18 months in the firm, and you've spent a year moaning. So even then, he didn't even spend 18 months in the firm, because they had a holiday. I mean, Meghan's had a whole baby. She's on baby number 2. She had a whole baby, so she wasn't even really around, and she conceived that baby, I think it was literally 2 months or whatever after they got married. And we know she's not really pregnant, right? She doesn't have these kids. But it's just ridiculous the way he's tried to lie. So it continues on here. Father of one also revealed he was willing to take, you know, substances to feel less like I was feeling, and more than a decade after his mother's untimely passing. Every time I put a suit and tie on, having to do the role and go, right, game face, look in the mirror and say, let's go. Before I even left the house, I was pouring with sweat and I was in fight mode. I was willing to do whatever it took, basically, to make me feel like I was less feeling. And then he said, I would drink on a week's worth of alcohol on a Friday or Saturday night. And we've all seen Harry's booze episodes and the tragic results of them. He said, I saw GPs, I saw doctors, I saw therapists, I saw alternative therapists, I saw all sorts of people. And this would have been instructed by, of course, Charles. Now, Meghan lied and said, oh, I never had access to mental health support, which your husband's been through every single therapist in the directory known to man. It's just unfounded. You know, it's not true, is it? So he said, I saw all sorts of people, and he still needs to see those people quite clearly. But it was meeting and being with Meghan. He explained on the show, it was meeting and being with Meghan, which is really, you know, the last person that he needed to see. He continued, I knew that if I didn't do the therapy and fix myself, that I was going to lose this woman who I could see spending the rest of my life with. That would have been a good thing, Harry, because you would have had a better life than what you've got now. And like I said, this victimhood narrative, I think, serves two purposes. It's to make money, and it's also a desperate ploy to get likability and to undo all the crap. Now, he's tried to extend the time that he spent in the royal family trying to make it work to 4 years. No, it was 1.5 years, Harry. It was 1.5 years. And he's basically trying to say, you know, Meghan was the reason why I'm still standing. Well, at this point, Harry, you're so detested by the public, no one really cares what gets you ticking. We just want you to shut up, right? So the last of it is that he said, the moment I started therapy, it was probably within my second session, my therapist turned around to me and said, that sounds like you're reverting to the 12-year-old Harry. And Harry does sound like a whining, petulant child, doesn't he? So, yeah, and then he goes on to bang on about, you know, how he hasn't really moved past being 12 years old, which is very evidenced in his life. Harry hasn't moved past being 12 years old. He's still very much the 12-year-old boy, berating his father and telling his father how crap of a dad he is, and berating the Queen, everyone associated with his dad, and pointing the finger. Harry's gone to America, but some people are just so, what can I say, unfulfilled and empty and broken and malicious and toxic, that no matter where they run in the world, no matter how much alcohol they consume, no matter how many substances they consume, they will never see that the issue lies with them, and they'll never see outside of themselves. Harry is very self-serving, self-involved and engulfing, and Meghan shares those narcissistic qualities, but not to the extent whereby it's coming from any real trauma or pain. She hasn't lost any of her parents. Of course, she had a weird relationship with her mum because her mum was in prison. But I just find it really, what can I really say? I'm lost for words, right? I don't feel sorry for Harry. I think that he's still very much in the wrong, because the more vitriol that he spews out of his big trap, the worse it gets for the rest of the firm. And they're the people that I really feel sorry for, because they're just trying to do their job, okay? They're just trying to do a job. So with all that being said, guys, I will be back with another video, and there's so much to cover. There's so many expert opinions that are going to, you know, spiral out from this unnecessary confession from Harry himself. Bye, guys.